Yo, hell yeah. Wyatt begins in like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yo, welcome to Wyatt, and I'm your host, Wyatt O'Brien Evans. Grrr, woof, goddammit, woof, 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 woof. Hey, to all my YouTubers out there, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, just click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen. Just click it, click it, click it. I loves to click it. Yeah. Hi. Today's episode of Wyatt is the return engagement of that multi-hyphenate talent, Anthony Carter. And the gentleman is an author, a writer, a documentary filmmaker, and radio personality. So let's just get to talking. And without further ado, Wyatt, welcomes back Mr. Anthony Carter. Talk to me, my brother. How the hell are you?
I am good. The last time we talked, I think, was 4 or 5 months ago.
It's
So
true.
I was just, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just starting a new job, and I'm now about 5 or 6 months into it, loving it.
That's
learning a whole lot.
right.
So I'm doing really good. Settling into Connecticut
Uh-huh.
in snow and freezing weather and all that kind of stuff.
Tell me about it. I'm here in DC. It's a little warmer today, but we've had some really cold weather. But man, I am Mr. Carter, Mr. Multi-Hyphenate. Like you said, you were with us last year. I had to have you back. Now, today, my friend, we're going to dive into your most recent book, Twice as Good, then your new release called Why Your Job is Making You Fat. And then we're going to talk about, I really want to know about that. And then we're going to talk about your popular podcast, man, Visionaries and Truthtellers. So does that work for you today?
Yes, it does.
Okay. But before we get into all of that, let's reacquaint you with our audience, your backstory. So first of all, tell us, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Guthrie, Oklahoma.
Oh.
And my parents met and got together on a college campus, Langston University, HBCU. I was born in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and then my dad is from Detroit. So they moved back to Detroit when I was about a year old. So I was raised in Detroit between the ages of 1 and 18 before I went to college.
Oh, cool. Now, I'm going to ask you this question because I get a big kick out of it. So when you were a little boy, a little nipper, what 3 characteristics best described you?
Okay, I was re-listening to our last interview today because I wanted to make sure I tightened it up and had grown as an interview subject. I think the 3 words to describe me. Well, I'm trying to be you when I grow up. So,
please.
The 3 words I would use to describe myself were creative, curious, and I would say very, I don't know if it's empathic or compassionate, but I was very sensitive as a kid.
That's nice. So what were you curious about?
I was curious about absolutely everything, and I wanted to know how things worked, why things were the way they were, why did people act the way that they did. I was curious about, I just had a lot of, I was curious about life. I was curious about God and where we came from and where the babies come from. And, what's the difference between living here in Detroit and living in New York City or living in LA? I was curious about absolutely everything.
Nice. Okay. Well, that helps you with your writing and the
Hmm.
podcast and all of that because you have to have a curious mind and yeah, you have to have all of that. Cool. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, look, let's fast forward. You earned a BA in English from Fisk University in Tennessee. In 2008, you moved to California to further your dream of being in TV and film.
Hmm.
And then you have said, and I quote, I had no huge plan other than using my talent and my pluck to build a film TV career. I love pluck. And then you added, I learned that this wasn't enough. That's heavy.
Hmm.
Let's get into that.
What I learned was uh, when I moved to New York, I just kind of, I literally packed one bag. I was in Japan. I
Oh
left
wow.
Detroit
Okay.
and I made the decision in 95 that I was going to either move to Japan and teach English, or I
Hmm.
was going to move to New York and be an artist and support myself as a performing artist.
Right.
Didn't know what any of this meant, right? Just once again, the curiosity, right? I've been wanting to go to Japan for a long time. I had been researching it. I had been interviewing for jobs in Japan for 2 years running and couldn't make anything happen. And then just a really odd um, turn of events ended up getting an opportunity to go to Japan.
Hmm.
So when I got that opportunity, and it's interesting, when I got the opportunity, I had no money, right? I was living in
Oh.
this apartment. I had no money. I didn't have a job.
Ouch. Ouch.
I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money, but I'm just determined. Okay, this has got to happen. I've got
Hmm.
8 months to make this happen. So in that 8 months, I actually got a job, a great job that I loved, worked, saved money, and then decided I'm either going to move to Japan or, like I said, or move to New York. So I got rid of my
Hmm.
apartment, quit my job, left everything in Detroit. I was 27. Got to Japan, was there for 6 weeks.
Wow.
I was working in an organic tea garden in the mornings.
Okay.
And then in the afternoons, I was teaching Japanese non English speakers English to mentally challenged adults to get them back into the workforce. And I was
Uh,
trying to hustle up a job, right? Let me see if I can, you know, get myself a job or tell people I'm interested. So I was, I was getting a couple of nibbles, but it wasn't, I was on a really tight deadline
hmm.
because I had set it up so that I only had about 6 weeks to make this happen. So when the 6 weeks were up, I was coming back to New York. I set it up so that I was only coming back to New York. The flight was not coming back to Detroit.
Can I
Then
do
from
a quick
Detroit, yes.
can I do a quick sidebar because
Mhm.
inquiring minds want to know, my friend. And we go back a long way and we always listen, listen, my audience. Mr. Carter and I go back a long way and we have these wonderful, funny, serious discussions. But this is what I want to ask you, okay?
Mhm.
What were the Asian brothers like?
Um, that's interesting. I didn't have any of those experiences when I was there. One for a couple of reasons. The first thing, when I went to Japan, I had just come out of this really doomed from the start relationship with somebody I shouldn't have been involved with, and
Oh,
they weren't really involved with
yeah.
me. I wasn't super involved with them, but it was kind of something. It was one of those things where it was kind of like I connected with almost like your house being on fire, right? Like this, you
Yeah.
get engulfed in these flames, right? And you know it's not going to end well. and then, and there's absolutely no way to make anything productive happen out of this union.
Where's
You
the
just
fire extinguisher?
you just can't, and it's something that happened. And then so when I got to Japan, a
Mm,
lot of my mind was still in Detroit, like kind
got
of
it.
wrapped up with this person. And I went there purposely. My goal was to, once again, being curious, was to soak up as much of the culture as I possibly could.
Sure.
And to me, that did not entail like dating and hooking up and that type of thing. I was like, I want as much culture as I can get. I want to learn as much about the food as I can. I want to be
Mhm.
invited in as many people's homes as I can. So none of that was on the menu. I'll put it that way.
Well, listen, my listeners, my audience, I tried to get something salacious out of him. It didn't work. So let me put,
There's nothing to report.
damn, man, damn. Okay, let me put you back on track. New York. Okay.
Okay. All right. When you said Salacious, I was thinking that had he had asked me about Boston, that'd be a different story. But we're
Oh,
gonna
we
move. We'll go, that's for the next interview.
damn. You such a tease, but go ahead.
Okay, so New York. So yeah, I moved to New York from Japan. I had one bag because I had been in New York, been in Japan all summer. So I
Mm-hmm.
moved. I had one bag. Um, didn't really know the true definition of pluck until I got there and once again had to figure out literally, okay, you're on a time schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You have got 2 weeks to get a job and get your own place. Because what had happened was I had one or two friends that were living in New York at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody kept telling me, oh, you should move to New York. You know, you're very talented. You're a great artist. You know, you can stay with me. The usual things people tell you in your 20s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being in my 20s, that's what I thought, you know. So I showed up, you know.
You popped up
Well, yeah, from Tokyo, fresh from Tokyo.
fresh
I
from
showed up
Tokyo. Mm.
and people were like, what are you doing here? You know, and not one household, but two told me, well, no, you're not moving in here. Right. So then I had to figure it out.
Wow.
And that was one of the biggest grown up lessons I had about responsibility and taking care of myself. Right.
Sure.
Because I had to figure it out. Because I was not going to go back to Detroit. There was no way for me to make that happen. I didn't give myself, I didn't let myself off the hook by saying, I'll just go back to Detroit. So I
Right.
said, okay, what am I going to do? So I gave myself this 2 week time period. And in the 2 week time period, I ended up getting my own place in Harlem, getting a job at Barnes and Noble, and joining an R&B cover band and doing a show
All
within 2 weeks.
right, man.
So we were not. So I know what I can accomplish when I clear off everything on the menu and say
Mm-hmm.
no to a lot of nonsense and just say yes to this is what I'm going to focus on. So
Right.
that's what I was able to do. And that was almost 30 years ago.
Wow. Amazing. Okay, and then you ended up in California, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
So I had been in New York from 1995 to 2008,
Mm-hmm.
and it was time to leave. You know, it was one of those situations where I had met a career coach like we do when you're in the business, you know, in New York and Japan, and everybody sells you, excuse me, this big, you're a star kid, you know, you're gonna, they say you this,
Yeah.
they know what to tell you, right? Because most of us are so
Right.
hungry, and most of us are working so hard that when somebody throws you a bone,
Mm-hmm.
you respond. I mean, that's what anybody would do, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I had taken a number of classes. I had done a lot of shows in New York. I had done off Broadway. I had toured in Beauty and the Beast. I had done stand-up comedy. I had my own comedy room. I had done, I had auditioned a couple times for Law and Order. I auditioned for Saturday Night Live. I had been on
Oh.
a soap opera. So I was doing it. You know, I was doing the the actor's hustle.
Mm-hmm.
By the time 2008 rolled around, I looked around and I realized I was like, okay, I'm 40 years old and I'm still on the same treadmill I was on when I got here at 27.
Okay.
And nothing
Okay.
was I was having some movement, but the way that
Mm-hmm.
I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is 13 years into the game for me. I
Right.
should be I shouldn't have the same issues, the same struggles at 40 that I have at 27. There's something that's got to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I met a person who was met someone who was a career coach and whatever and blah blah blah. She had all these, you know, folks that were in LA. She had some people in New York. I got hooked up with her. I came out to LA,
Mm-hmm.
and the goal was to do TV and film. And she did, true to her word, she did set it up to meet a lot of people. We had a meet and greet in
Mm.
LA for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to meet and greet like 50 or 60 different agents, managers, producers, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And I always know my numbers, so I know that whatever I cast out there, about a third of whoever will respond. So if I meet 60 people, 20 of them are going to be interested, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. So 20 were interested. Somebody asked me, "Do you want to do this film? Do you want to?" And what I didn't know, going back to your question about pluck or your statement about pluck, I didn't have any grand plan when I moved to LA. right?
Oh.
The grand plan was to do TV and film, but I had no idea what that entailed. So there was no, it was kind of like, well, I'm here and I don't have a car. I don't have a driver's license because I've been in New York for 13 years. I don't have a driver's license. I don't have a car. Not knowing that you may live in, like I lived in Long Beach, but the auditions may be on the other side of LA.
Yeah.
Well, if you're taking a bus, I actually took a bus to UCLA from Long Beach on a Sunday once to audition for
Mhm.
a Shakespeare program at Oxford College and in England and got in, but that was a 4 hour ride on Sunday and I was late to it. I explained to them why. I said, why are you late? And I explained, and luckily, I guess I was good enough. They're like, well, but yeah, it's a very, very different beast. So the pluck thing didn't work out so well, the
Oh.
West Coast version of it. But now I know now I know the game of it and what you need
Mhm.
to do to be successful in it. I was not clear, like a lot of people who are artistic or creative, we understand putting out content. We understand doing the work. We understand being
Mhm.
artistic. Rarely do we understand the concept of business and marketing, right? And
Absolutely.
strategizing what you're going to do, and laying it out like
Absolutely.
this is what I'm going to. And so until you now I get it. Now I know, okay, this is going to happen. And that's kind of how I run everything now. Every
You,
part of my life is run like that now.
you know what it has? I'm so glad you brought this up, Anthony, because it has to be. For example, when aspiring authors ask me about promotion and marketing and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, I say you really need to have that. You need to start that as soon as you begin to write your book.
Mm-hmm.
You got to figure out who your audience is,
Mm-hmm.
whether this is going to be a hobby for you or you really want it to be a profession, selling something, but you have to create that marketing promotional plan from the very jump.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right.
And I think so many of us either we shy away from it, we don't want to do it, we consider it selling out, whatever that means. And it's like, no, anybody who's
Mhm.
successful, they have a plan. They don't just stumble into, what I mean, they have the other side of it too. But there's also a plan. It's kind of like when you look at it's like I was watching something the other night and I saw Viola Davis on some movie that had come out a couple of years ago, right?
Right.
And I know for a fact, I mean, I don't know her personally, but I know for a fact that I know that she has the goods, right? She's an incredible actress. Like she is the
Mhm.
actress, right? And you've got to figure out, okay, but I can be the actress and be on Broadway and the big money people that can fund these huge projects I want to do are never going to see me, right? So how do I raise my visibility? Well, I'll do a TV show, right?
Mhm.
And I'll be in people's homes every week for 6 years. So then it's like, oh, okay, I remember I've seen you. You can pull the numbers. So a lot of it, you have to be strategic, and I didn't know that. I fought against that,
Mhm.
and I didn't for a number of years until it took me until I was about in my 40s to get that. And then I thought, oh, everything is like that. So now everything that I do, I run it through that lens. I do both sides. I'll do the work. Sometimes I do the work, and then I figure out, well, who can I basically peddle this to? Who would be interested in this? Or
Mhm.
I find the audience, and I say, and I look. In my day jobs, I do this a lot of times. I'll look for the audience first and say, what do you need?
Mhm.
And then I go create it and bring it to them. But it's a very I've had to learn how to be a lot more strategic, or continue to be broke. And I've done that. We're not going to do that anymore.
Absolutely, because you are the brand and
Hmm.
your product is nothing more than an extension of yourself. You have to
Hmm.
you're always selling yourself because you are the brand and your record, your book,
Hmm.
whatever is simply an extension of that brand, an extension of you. Hmm. Okay. Well, I want to be like you when I grow up. Okay, let's move on to your insightful, man, your thought provoking, and your refreshingly direct books. Let's dig into Twice as Good, and then we're going to talk about why your job is making you fat. And everybody, these books are must reads. Everybody need to read these. So let's start with Twice as Good. Give us the synopsis. What is that all about?
Twice as Good is my homage, so to speak, to Black artists and creatives that came before me that I feel I listen to. I feel I owe a lot of what I do or all of what I do to these people.
Mhm.
Um, there are people as diverse as Prince and Eartha Kitt,
Mm,
Stevie Wonder and Lauryn Hill,
right.
these kind of folks who, in many instances, to me, were as creative as they were brave.
Mm,
So I wanted to write. I wanted to write a collection that was all about basically me saying thank you, my thank you letter, my love letter to them. And I don't know if you can see it on the wall, but on the wall I have a thing of Eartha Kitt. It's framed right here, and
I
at the
love
bottom I
her.
leave right here. I got two Tina Turners here. I got a Jimi Hendrix right here, a Mom's Mabley. So we've got, and I'm getting my Grace Jones wall together next week or so. But yeah,
Wait.
that's what the book is about. Me saying thank you to these folks because I look at it in terms of some of the barriers and things they had to go through
Mm,
just to get on the stage,
mm,
right? I don't have any of. I don't have those. Mine are different, and they're probably just as significant to me in my time right now, but they're
right.
nowhere near what Nina Simone had to go through or what Eartha Kitt had to go through. I was thinking about Eartha Kitt yesterday because I was watching a special with her, and she was and in her one of her books she was talking about how she speaks like 7 8 she used to speak 7 8 languages, right?
Hmm.
And she was at a show somewhere. I don't know if it was French. She was somewhere. It wasn't in America, but she was somewhere in a show, and these people were speaking a language, and they assumed that she was, because she was a Black American, she wouldn't know what they were saying. So what they said
Uh,
when she was coming by, this guy said, "Oh, he said something to the tune of, I wonder what this nigga is gonna do," right? And he didn't know that she spoke the language. So she went up
mm.
there and turned. Of course, she went up there and turned it out in those 7 8 languages, and then walked by his table and basically told him, "Well, now you can see what this, you know, this is what this nigga can do," right? And he was just like, uh. So I mean, when you think about that, right? How do you hear that moments before you set foot on the
Mm.
stage and go up and blow them away anyway? How do you show up and do that? So this book is all about literally me feeling many times, even when I'm writing or I'm thinking or I'm scared or I need bravery. I feel like I don't know if I hear them or they're kind of here with me, like gently put like, go do this. Like hit that publish button and get on with it and deal with whatever's coming. So that's why I wrote it, and that's what it's about.
Well, you know what? The Twice as Good chapter that really struck me, my brother, it's titled "My First Black Gay Mentor," Essex Hemphill. Now,
Oh
let me
yeah.
talk about Mr. Hemphill. He was a groundbreaking, uber talented, openly and unabashedly gay SGL black man, poet and author ahead of his time. He blazed the way for scores of us, black literary talents. He's a true force of nature. And I had the privilege of knowing him because we worked together at the Potomac Electric Power Company here in Washington, D.C. He was a graphic artist. I was an editor writer for the communications department, and we got to know each other. We became friends. So I want to read a quote from that chapter. You
Hmm.
say this, and I quote, and everybody, this is so profound. Here we go. Essex helped me define what I wanted to be and transformed my thinking regarding what it meant to be Black, gay, and male. Essex showed me through his writing that to be handed the gift and power that comes with being Black, gay, and male was indeed an honor and nothing to be ashamed or apologetic about for any reason at any time. End quote. Poignant. Let's dig into that.
I wrote
Yes, you wrote it. Listen, you know what? Your problem is you've written so many books, you forgot what you write. You
that.
better go and recognize.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was for me a beacon, and I have a story because I met him, and it's not a salacious story. I know you always looking for some dirt, but it's a very sweet story, right?
Okay. I'll take it.
It's one of those sweet stories that, in my opinion,
Mhm.
should be what gay elders do for young folks coming
Ah,
up, right? So when you meet these young cats and you're an elder, it was one of those kind of exchanges. So here's a story. So I had broken up with somebody. I don't know who. I don't even remember who it was. And I was going on. I was on a date with somebody else, and somebody told me. They said, "Oh, Essex is coming to." There was a black men's group in Detroit.
mm.
He's going to be at this. He's going to come to this church and he's going to talk and do a lecture, whatever. Do you want to come? Hell yeah! Now the guy I was going with, I don't know. I don't know if he could read or he'd ever read a book, but he didn't know who he was. He was bored, and we started. Essex was doing his. It wasn't even a lecture. It was more like a. It was a small group in this church or this community center, and it was a lot of heart to heart
Mm.
connections. Just basically being very open about himself and what he's doing and what he's done and that kind of thing. And in that moment, in those moments he was talking, he and I kept asking questions, right? Once again, being curious,
Mm.
right? And it was like we started talking and connecting, and felt like the whole room just faded away
Wow. Wow.
because we started talking about right in the middle of this when people we start talking about books,
Mhm.
right, and the kind of books we like, and we start talking about James Baldwin and our favorite James Baldwin book and why. And you remember this passage when he ate the pork chops? Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite. And I was just like, and it was like nobody else. Now I'm there on the date, right? So then after that was over, they said somebody came. No, he came up to me, and he said, they're having like an after party, a small intimate gathering, at somebody's
Mhm.
house, right? And would you come? Would you like to come? Sure. And this guy I was with, I took him, and we got there, and Essex and I once again connected. We kept talking, kept talking, and at one point I looked over, and this clown, this fool was
Oh
sweeping,
no. No, no.
and I let me know one, I should be
No.
dating you. So, and I want to say I can't remember this, but I want to say I took him home, took the date home, and came back.
Oh,
Or I might have.
yes, good.
Well, you don't want. Well, clearly you don't want to be there,
Right.
right? And you don't sit at the feet of somebody with this magnitude of just
Mhm.
greatness and doze. Like, how do you, you know? So I said, well, do you need to go? So at some point I did, take the person home, and it was one of those. Like I say, it was one of those. And this has happened. I think this happened maybe 30 years ago, 31 years ago. It was a long. I was a kid. I was in my early 20s. And I had been reading his stuff. That's how I knew who he
Right.
was. And I just was just absolutely blown away by him,
Mhm.
you know. And so that's my Essex Hemphill story.
He was so charismatic,
Mhm.
so intelligent, so intuitive. He was truly ahead of his time,
Mhm.
really.
Yes.
Okay, well, what are some of the takeaways from Twice as Good?
Some of the takeaways, um, I would love, love, love if I had 1,000 young people, young black creatives, young black artists who could read this book and know that, okay, yeah, Beyonce's who she is. Yeah, the other folks are who they are. But
Uh,
there were people
oh
before
God,
that,
yeah.
right? There were people before that.
Hmm.
Grace Jones has been around forever,
Yes.
right? Tina Turner has been around forever. You know, there are people that
Donna Summer.
have paid some Donna Summer, right? There's some people who have paid some serious dues who are really great,
Exactly.
who were working without a record deal,
Right.
right? Who were working without a contract, who worked when they wouldn't let us in films, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. So I really want my takeaway is young people, please read this and know that other people went before you. Not to discount what's going on now, not to erase it, but just to understand when you're looking at something, you understand what you're looking
Mm-hmm.
at, right? Oh, okay, this, because I see so many young people who are doing things almost like they sprang from the head of Zeus, as they say. Like nobody else came before. We weren't making music before 1998. But yeah, we were. You know, and I was watching the other day. I was listening to an interview with I was watching a documentary on Alberta Hunter,
Mm.
and I knew the name, but I didn't know her whole story. Fascinating, right? She was running around in Paris, and Josephine Baker and all those people were over there. You know, that's another one. I want people. I want that's my takeaway. Know your history. Do do some research. Know that you come from greatness, right? And know that yeah, it's going to be hard, but the people it was hard. It's always been hard, and people have done it. They figured something out.
And really briefly, look at Roberta Flack.
Oh,
PBS did that documentary and that aired about, I think, 10
hmm,
days ago. Look at Roberta
okay.
Flack. A lot of young folks don't know who she is. They don't know who Roberta Flack is. And, that just boggles the mind, because if we don't know our history, how in the world can we understand the world that we live in today? You know? So,
And we won't have anything. What I remind people, you're talking about curiosity and living in the what ifs of the world. If you don't know the greats that have gone
mm,
before you, right? You can only pull from what you know. Well, you don't know anything at 23 or 24. I
yeah,
didn't.
me either.
You don't know anything, right? Or you know about this
Right.
much. But if you're reading and you're taking in artists and you're taking in music, you can't. I see people all the time and want to be singers, and like you said, they don't know who Roberta
Mhm.
Flack is. They don't know Nina Simone. They
Right.
don't know Josephine Baker.
They don't know Dorothy.
They don't know Diane Carroll. I'm like, how do you not know
They
Diane
don't know
Carroll?
Thank
Dorothy
you. They
Dandridge.
don't know Dorothy. I mean, that could be a whole nother show. What I want.
Hmm. So for me, that was primarily the reason that I wrote the book because I'm really big on I think when somebody has done something
Mhm.
substantial, when you've moved me or moved masses of people, it's important that you stay alive,
Mhm.
right? Like
Uh,
white folks with Elvis, right? They won't let that go. It is, they will not let that go. And we have, and then, and our folks, they come and go, and we don't get, and you don't hear, like you said, you don't hear anybody talking about Nina Simone. You don't hear folks talking about any of those
what
folks.
Elvis did was tweak black music. He tweaked it. He tweaked it
Hmm.
and made it more palatable to the masses, to white folks. But the core of
Hmm.
Elvis's stuff was black. But I'm gonna move on now because I'm gonna get upset, and I don't feel like getting upset tonight. I don't feel like it. Look, let's segue to your newest. Why your job is making you fat. Tell us porkers about that.
Well, let me start off by saying, from a marketing standpoint, I was trying to figure out what would, you know,
Hmm.
kick up some dust, what would get people like, you know, and I know that from tons of research on marketing, I know that negativity makes
Hmm.
people respond, right? They look at it, they have a reaction to it. So I was thinking about the title. I was like, let me write this. So I had the title. I wrote the
Mhm.
essays first, and then pulled one of the titles from the essay. Um, is more along the lines for me about how so many of our I call them now
I like
funding sources.
that.
That's my new term that I borrowed from a young black female
Hmm.
filmmaker out of Chicago. With micro. I think she's from Micro Filmmaking Budget. I think that's her. She's on Twitter. but I look at them as
Mm-hmm.
funding sources, right? So many times at our day jobs, at our funding sources, it's so much drama,
Right.
it's so much stress. And I know that with me, I can always look at how much weight I've gained or lost depending
Yeah.
on my stress levels with my day job. Because most of the time, most of us who work, we spend more, if you work a full time job, probably spend more
Mm-hmm.
time at your job than you do with your significant
Yeah.
other or your family. And here's the reason why. Because even though you may clock in at 8, right? Let's say you start, like I used to have jobs that I
Right.
worked from 8 to 5. Well, I don't start working at 8 and stop at 5. By the time I get up at 4 or 5, so I get up at 4 or 5 to write for an hour, to meditate for an hour. By the time all that's done, let's say it's 6, I've been thinking and planning about what I'm going to do for work since 6. So by the time I get there at 8, that's really my third hour of work,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm thinking, when it's 5 o'clock and the day is over, I may clock out and go home, but I'm thinking about things I have to do, or I may see something that
Yeah.
oh, this particular student, this particular client would be really could really benefit from this over here. So it's one of these things. A lot of times there is no, it's way more
Mm-hmm.
than 40 hours, right? And if it's not if it's not a labor of love, and it's not something that I feel, and I found this out the hard way 10 years ago in 2000, no, 12 years ago, 2011. If it's, I look at everything in terms of a day job, funding source. I want to be around people, and I only want people around me who are loving, appreciative,
Right.
and respectful. Period. All this other nonsense, leave all that at home, because I'm gonna leave all mine at home. We all got stuff, right? But nobody needs to see that. And I think a lot of times with what I wrote, the essays that I wrote were a lot about the stressors that come with working,
Ah.
right? And the difference between, I have a very wonderful mentor from the Black Health Academy. He talks about stress. Like, you need some of it. Like,
True.
some stress
True.
is
True.
good. So, for example, I'm going to try to explain it. So, if you have a stress, there's a stress that comes with, okay, I got to get this done by this deadline, right? Like, I knew I had to get some stuff to you. I had to get the book to you, and there were a couple of other things I had to
Mhm.
get to you by the time
Right.
we got on this call. So that's a certain level of stress. And here's the thing: whether I get it to you or not, the reality of it is now we're in this call. So it's over. I mean, in terms of either I made the deadline or I didn't, and it's over, right? That's one type of stress. Many times we have this chronic stress where it's ongoing. There's no deadline for it. There's no shelf life. It just kind of keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going and you're constantly stressed. So what I find is that when I've been in those situations, I eat
Mm-hmm.
more and I gain weight and I have high blood pressure and I
Mm-hmm.
can't sleep at night. I do all these things and then I normalize it, right? And rather than say, hey, do a self check and say, hey, I
Right.
need to pull back, or maybe it's time to get out of this line of work or this particular type of work, I just
Mm-hmm.
normalize it, right? And the funny thing about it is we live in a world that will help you normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
Your friends and peers will normalize it. Then the doctors in the pharmacy are happy to
Mm-hmm.
write your prescription for whatever
That
you
is
got,
so true.
whatever ails you. Then when that doesn't work, they give you something else, and that counteracts the first stuff. So no, we don't want to do that. So the whole book is about how do we um, take back the power of where we spend a lot of our waking hours.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. Interesting. Interesting. Um, so what are takeaways?
Um, I think one of the big takeaways that just off the top of my head, there's an essay. There are two essays that are takeaways for me. There's one that says how bosses
Oh
gamble
God,
with your
yeah.
future, and and 6 ways to um, kind of prepare for the inevitable, right? And when I say inevitable, inevitable means there's some kind of change, right? You may quit, you may get fired, the company may close, you may have a pandemic, right? Nobody planned for
Mm-hmm.
that. So the takeaways would be that essay because that's a 6 point plan for how you literally manage your life so you're not at the mercy of
Mm.
other people, right? And when you have no money, because people forget that poverty is
Oh,
trauma,
yeah.
right? Yeah, people forget that. Yeah. So and if you have no money, I'm probably gonna let you talk to me
Hmm.
crazy, right? If I don't have any savings and I need you, like my mother always says, if you sign the back of the check and the other person signs the front, the person that signs the front of the check is the one, that gets to, talk crazy to you or not, or do whatever. But when you have no money and I need you and I'm one paycheck away from being in the street, I'll put up with a lot of
Yeah.
things. Once I have $1,000 in an emergency fund, things may look a little
Hmm.
different. And don't mess around and get 5 or 10 or 20 or $30,000 put aside. That's like cash at the ready so that you have enough so that you can sustain your
Right.
lifestyle for 6 or 8 or 12 months. You don't want people talking to you crazy when you're in that position. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. But what happens is, that's to me, that's the first big takeaway is that six
Right.
point plan of how do you set yourself up so it doesn't matter what anybody does, right? So here's an example. I was teaching this class once, and I was asking these young people
Hmm.
about the pandemic. And the big question to start the day off, the big brain teaser, the big brain dump was by show of hands, we went to Zoom, so put it in Zoom. By show of hands, or just drop it in Zoom, who was prepared for the pandemic? Now, a lot of these folks said, well, I was. And I said, well, no, you weren't. Because unless you lived in Spain in 1920, doing that was the last big pandemic we had. You weren't around 100 years ago. Nobody knew this was coming. There was absolutely no way to prepare for this. So if you didn't prepare and you're spending every dime and you're not managing, you're not being able to your money, then if let's say, for example, if you're doing that and you
Hmm.
work in a restaurant, I know tons of
Right.
restaurants that closed. I know hotels that laid off tons of people. So if you're living that close to the edge and now somebody's telling you you can't work for 6 months, 8 months, a year, what are you going to do? That's, yeah. Or if you have been, if the assumption in your head is always like my assumption, and I've learned this, and this is not gloom or doom, my assumption has always been, since I've gotten older, is that there's always something coming,
True.
good,
True.
bad, or indifferent, right? There's always something
Hmm.
on the horizon. And part of being an adult means you
Right.
just handle it. The difference between me and many of the people that I knew and many of my coworkers was to them it was a disaster when COVID hit. To me, it was an inconvenience. Like, oh, I
Mm.
really don't want to do this. Like, but I wouldn't have chosen this. But now it's here. What do I need to do to make this
Hmm.
work? Right. And that's when I knew I had gone on to glory. Because when that happened and I didn't panic, I knew something had changed. That's the first one. Let me give you the other one. The other one is there's an essay in there that says, I think it's like 7 resources for living the dangerous life you were designed to live.
Mm.
And what that is about, I went through and I put some really good YouTube
Hmm.
links in there, right? And some of them are short, some of them are long, some of them are medium length, and they're all 7 different um, ways of looking at a version of what I just said, what I just explained, which is how do I
Hmm.
move
Hmm.
forward, right? All these things are going on. What do I need to do? How do I shift without waiting for all of this to change? Because it may not change, right? So then
Ah.
how can I take responsibility and have the life that I want, saying that, okay, these things probably aren't going to change. So
Hmm.
that one, like I said, those are 7 different videos in there,
Wow.
seven
I
YouTube
love it.
links.
Everybody remember why your job is making you fat. Now, I've got to do something, Anthony, if you allow me. Is it okay if I do something?
Hmm.
Here it is. Let me
Yes.
tell you something.
I was going to say, maybe I should
I had
ask.
to do that because it's very cathartic for me. Now I say that
Okay.
because you're also a radio personality. I want to be like you when I grow up, you see. So your podcast is called Visionaries and Truthtellers. It can be found on your website,
Hmm.
www.anthonycarter.com. So First of all, I have to congratulate you because your podcast is absorbing, it's enlightening, it's entertaining. I've been on there before.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. And one thing I like about it is that sometimes the guest doesn't quite know where you're taking him or her, which makes for some
Mhm.
very good radio. So, first, tell us why you decided to create a podcast.
Okay. So before I do that, let me give you, we actually moved the podcast to
Oh,
another
okay.
site.
Okay.
And the site, the reason we moved it is because we have the podcast and the movies that I make are on a particular
Got it.
podcast. So it's visuals,
Hmm.
right? And that's burnthemanualproductions.com. So
And
burnthemanualproductions.com.
mhm.
So now let me explain to you why I did the
Okay.
podcast. Okay. So 10 years, I launched it it'll be 3 years in May. So I launched it in the middle of the
Hmm.
pandemic, 2 months, 3 months into it. I figure I'm at home, everybody else is home, why not, right? Now, but before that, for 10 years, I had this idea that I wanted to have some kind of show where I'd have conversations with people. Once again, going back to Twice as Good, I wanted to have conversations with people who had visions for humanity, right? Who were seeing
Ah.
things other people weren't seeing, who were ahead
Hmm.
of the curve, right? And were really taking on the mantle of not only moving themselves forward, but moving humanity forward. And what does that
Oh, okay.
look like? Now, in addition to that, I want part of that, I think is hand in hand goes with people who
Mm.
tell the truth. Because it's one thing to say, well, this is just the way that it is, right? And the truth might be, well, no, we don't have to do it this
Hmm.
way. What if we tried this? You know, so that was kind of the title. And then the two people that really got me thinking about it and kept it in my head for 2 years is two people. One of them has
Hmm.
been on the show. There were two celebrities. The first one was, I'm sure your listeners remember this group. There's a group
Oh,
called In Vogue in the
yes.
90s.
Yeah.
Okay. With Dawn Robinson, there was drama around, her being in the group, not being in the group. Whatever
Hmm.
went down, right? And you know, we got one side of the story because we didn't have social media when
Hmm.
all that happened, right? This was
Right.
97. We didn't have social media. So she resurfaced, a number of times. And one of the things I always liked about her was, okay, in addition to being extremely talented, when I saw her in interviews, when she started doing interviews, I felt like she was telling the truth, right? She could have easily made it into something else. So what I decided, I was like, okay, I want to have her on, when I have a conversation, I want
Mm.
to have her on my show. All right, there's somebody who's clearly a visionary and a truth teller, right? Second person that I'm really who's next on my hot list for this year, I'm gonna make it happen this year,
Oh,
is
God. Yeah.
Monique,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because I saw Precious, I've seen her do
Hmm.
stand up, I've seen her tell her side of the story, how things went, whatever. And I saw her in an interview again last night. And one of the things I liked about what she's doing is she says stuff, she doesn't back down, and she invites people to have a conversation. Now, folks won't have one, for whatever the reason. They won't do that. They
Uh-huh.
won't do that, and they'll just, they'll as the old folks used to say, they'll throw a rock and hide their hand, but they won't sit down and
Uh-huh.
have a conversation, right? So the reason I decided to do the podcast was for those two brilliant, beautiful Black women, because I thought, okay, well, they're telling the truth, right? They're truth tellers and they're visionaries about let's do this
Uh-huh.
differently, right? We don't have to be doing this the same way. We don't have to be artists that get ripped off. We don't have to do things in a way that are negative and
Mm.
unproductive. So fast forward to 2020, I just started reaching out to people and recording them. I figured out how Zoom worked because we were on Zoom at work. We started Zooming in March of 20. I got told on a Friday, oh, by the way, you'll be teaching on Zoom as of Monday. All the classes you're teaching will be on Monday. So I spent the whole weekend trying to master Zoom, and then went in there and started teaching Monday, right? So 3 months into it, I was like, oh, there's a record button on here. I wonder if I can record something. So I, excuse me, played around with it, recorded a few things, and then I started
Mm-hmm.
reaching out to people. I reached out to a guy who I had met 10 years prior, and I was like, hey, I'm doing this show. Would you come on? Didn't know what I was doing, just started doing it and kind of kept going from there. And one of the things that I actually love about myself, I wish more people would do it, is I always, always, always start before I'm ready. I'll never know what the hell I'm doing. I get an idea and I just follow it. Like, okay, well, I'll figure it out. I will figure out what I'm supposed to figure out, but I need to figure it out. So I started doing this show, Visionaries and Truthtellers, and did not know. I started this show in March of 20.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know until November. Maybe it was November, October, November. I started taking this filmmaking class, and I asked my professor to come into the class, to come in on my show and talk. And he said, "Oh yeah," and he sent me an email, and he told me on a call. He said, "Oh yeah, I'd be honored to be on your podcast." And I said, "Podcast?" I didn't even know I was doing a podcast. I didn't even know.
That's okay.
I said, "Oh, that's what this is called." I
That's
didn't.
all right.
I thought it was having conversations with interesting people that I thought were doing really great things for the planet
Mm-hmm.
and humanity. I didn't know it had a title.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's what this is? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, come join the podcast.
You're funny.
And just kept going and putting one foot in front of the other.
Mm.
So that's why I started doing it. I wanted to really highlight people doing exceptional work and forcing us to grow as human beings. Because there are a lot of people that have platforms that I feel are not doing that. It's a lot of hot
Mm-hmm.
air, right? There's a lot of white noise with the internet and these platforms. And there's some people that are really good, and there's some people that are just yapping, and you're like, what is going on here? Right? And people love them. So
Ah.
that was my goal.
I have a question for you. Have you ever
Mhm.
had a guest? Have you ever had a guest who was reticent, didn't want to talk, and you're trying to pull the best out of them and they just didn't want to talk? How did you handle that? How did
Oh
you
yeah.
handle that?
Uh, I don't know that I did handle it. I think I kind of wrapped it up pretty quick.
Ah!
That was one of my shorter. I think that was one of my shorter interviews. Um, well,
Oh my God.
the thing about it, I was talking to an executive director of this TV station where I volunteer
Mm.
and do projects with, and she and I were talking about how sometimes you meet people and they're very
True.
gregarious in person or on the phone. They have a
Ah.
lot to say. And then you hit the record button. You start putting them on camera, and all of a sudden, whatever all that was, it gets put to the side. And I've had that happen. Um,
Mhm.
Not a lot, a couple of times, because usually what I do, in an effort to prevent that, depending on how
Mhm.
well I know the person, I'll have a conversation about what we're going
Mhm.
to talk about.
Mhm.
So they may say, okay, I might say, okay, you might want to think about
Right.
these 4 or 5 things. Well, I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna end up here. Um, Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, Another trick that I sometimes what I'll do is I do have some questions that
Right.
are just kind
Right.
of fun, and I'll say, well, let's wrap it up, and that way we can end on a high and not circling the drain, so to speak. But yeah, it happens, and I think, as I get better, this is now year 3. I've done radio, right? I've done TV, I've done stand up, I've done sketch
Mm.
comedy,
Right.
I've done
Right.
improv, right? So a lot of things, I think that would bother other people don't necessarily bother me. Like silence
That's
doesn't
good.
bother me. You're
Right.
not gonna
Right.
have
Right.
10 minutes of it. But I mean, but but if somebody is thinking or they're processing something, that doesn't necessarily bother me. And I mean, and then a lot of times I've worked with other people where, depending on who you're working with, you might have somebody else who's
Mm.
producing the
Mhm.
show, right? Like this just happened. I just did a podcast for this great group out
Mhm.
of Atlanta and Philadelphia. It's called the Counter
Oh.
Narrative Project, and they're Black LGBTQ communities and changing the narrative around our history, our culture, where we're going in the future. And the two guys, there was a guy, was it one? I know it was one guy who was producing it. So we did enough material for like a couple. We set aside 2 hours to get enough
Mm-hmm.
material, right? I think we did an hour and a half, hour 45. But because he's a producer and he knows how to do it, he's been doing it
Right.
a long time. He was able to splice it together in a way that it sounds really great. So you don't hear the awkward pauses, you don't hear the, that kind of thing. And then um, we had also talked about, well, I think there was a lot of preparation in that before we hit record on that. So yeah, I've had that. I've had those kind of guests, and I've had people that will tell me one story
Mm-hmm.
before, and then you hit record, and you think, oh, I'm gonna get to this story. This will really nail it and bring home my point, and they won't go into that story. And you're like, okay,
What happened? What happened to the story?
we need that story. Yeah.
Okay,
So you figure it out. You figure it out.
got it. Well, Mr. Carter, what do you have on tap for
Mhm.
the rest of 2023? And tell us how we can, view Visionaries and Truthtellers again, and tell us how we can buy your
Mhm.
books.
Okay. If you want to see experimental films, which we've done, if you want to see documentaries, which we've done, you can go to burnthemanualproductions.com. So burnthemanualproductions.com. Um, I'm going to put this book on there, Why Your Job is Making You Fat. That's going to be on there for free. So all you have to do is give us your email. You can download it immediately. My goal is I want to give out 1,500 copies because my birthday is the end of the month, February 29th. And I'll be 55. So I want to give out, so your listeners, please, please, please go to that website, download the book as soon as this goes live. So you can go there for that. If you want to pay for books, if you want to buy books, we like that too.
I just know, I
We
know
got
you
whatever
do,
you
baby.
need.
I do
If you got,
too.
if you want something free, we got that. If you want to get more of my writing, if you want to buy books, the other 7 books that I've written are on my other website, which is anthony-carter.com. Anthony-carter.com is a section on there that's a book section. Those are all ebooks, PDFs. You can download those immediately as well, and those are about
Okay.
$9.95. So there's I think there's 7 of them over there, 7 or 8 of them over
Okay.
there.
What about your social media?
Social media is those two, and I'm on Twitter at Anthony L. Carter. I keep it very simple. I don't want to be there trying to manage a whole until I get like you and get a social media team, which once again I didn't know that I needed it until you said that. I
Well,
said, a team, you know,
well, Esteban Hadi.
until I get to until
Well,
I get to that point, we're gonna keep it at
let me give
Twitter.
shout outs to my podcast guru, Esteban, the head of my social media team, Hadi. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes. You need a team.
And
You
really
need a
quickly, I'm
team.
going to need a team because I launched this book in like April, right? So I'm going to go on a book tour. I'm going to need all the team
Hmm.
I can get.
Okay. The new one that's coming
Yes,
out is coming out in
the end of
April?
April.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, but
okay.
okay, back to you. Give us because I got kind of off script. So give us your social media one more time.
I'm on Twitter at Anthony L. Carter. So that's it.
All right.
That's my name. Keep it simple, short and sweet.
Well, Mr. Anthony Carter, thank you for coming back to Wyatt. I mean, man, my good friend, it's been a blast. You're always just the best.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It is always a great time to chat with you, get caught up. We had a whole lot of tech difficulties that we
Oh,
we stuck
yes, we
with it and we
did.
got it handled. Talk about perseverance.
Listen, I have to thank you for
And stick to itiveness. We did
thank you
it.
for your
We did it. It
thank
got
you for your
done.
patience, because I don't know what the hell was going on, but we put it together.
We did. We did. And that's life, right? That's life. It's always something you got to manage. So I appreciate it. I'm really proud of the work that you're doing. I'm watching your YouTube videos, and you got a lot of interesting people on there, a ton of rabbit fans. So we like that. So keep up the good work. I definitely want to read the book that you sent me, write a review for you. I wish you all the best with that. Are you going to do a live in person tour? Or are you going to do a virtual book
Both.
tour?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks.
All right. Well, Mr. Carter, thank you so much.
Thank you. I will talk with you
You
soon.
got it, my good buddy. So there you have it. You can find the official Wyatt podcast page on WyattEvans.com, the go-to destination for LGBTQ news, features, commentary, and entertainment. WyattEvans.com is visited by more than 100 countries on the regular. And WyattEvans.com is where you'll find my smoking hot, HAWT hot, Nothing Can Tear Us Apart series of novels. The current installment is Frenzy! Yeah, Frenzy, and it's hot. Its predecessor is Rage, all at WyattEvans.com. And soon, y'all, get ready for the brand new sequel in the Nothing Can Tear Us Apart series of novels. It's called Shattered! I said Shattered. Yeah, I'll get you more information on that soon. You can follow me, your host, Wyatt O'Brien Evans. You can drop me a line at wyattonair@gmail.com. Follow me on social media. It's all right there in front of your faces to peruse. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. So, hey, hit me up, follow me. So until next time, y'all, woof, goddammit, woof, 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 woof.